The Honorable Robert Reynolds Cushing, Jr., named for the father who was murdered by a local police officer with a grudge, with a shotgun blast at point-blank range at the front door of his own home. The home Renny continued to live in, unwilling to let even more be taken from him. It wouldn't be accurate to say that his father's murder is what turned Renny into a political activist. He was already a veteran at hitting the streets. My comradeship with Renny began before that, before, in fact, we had met. I was in law school in Boston in 1977 and learned that there was a movement protesting the construction of a nuclear power plant in Seabrook, New Hampshire. Can I get a first slide, and then I'll try to move them along after that? There was a charmingly ragtag band of young people marching in opposition to the nukes. They were called the Clamshell Alliance. I actually still have my button. And at their head was a very young Renny Cushing, showing his flair for getting his picture and his message into the newspaper. I recently learned that Renny has a history with Atlanta, the Southern Center's home. He integrated an important public works sector by rolling off a freight train, as he put it, and onto the business end of a garbage truck. He had experience from his hometown, and he got the job. The first white person to haul Atlanta's garbage. The other white guys were drivers. There was inequality on both sides of that equation, too. Garbage was collected twice a week in the white neighborhoods and once in the black neighborhoods. Renny gave himself the education he needed to become a leader of great causes. He traveled around, even farther than Atlanta, to Eastern Europe, to Canada, to Mexico. He worked in gold mines and labor organizing. He had all the instincts to find a good fight and step in on the side of justice. Renny and I actually met doing death penalty abolition work. He became and is still the most eloquent voice for the rights and dignity of families of murder victims, and the most eloquent voice of murder victims' family members in opposition to the death penalty. Articulate, seemingly patient, passionate, from the heart of pain, an unimpeachable voice for life over death. Renny brought that message to every fight against the death penalty in the United States and the world. I saw him outside the United States more than here. Meetings in Paris, Marrakesh, Amman, Brussels, Taipei, San Juan, Rome. Ask a capital defense lawyer in Japan who speaks for the victims, and they will tell you Renny Cushing. From every region of the world, in every region of the world, Renny has been an anchor of the death penalty abolition movement. Did that work? An international band, somewhat less ragtag. Wherever he goes, though, he wears his colors, and a shirt that says either Hampton or Winnicott, his high school. A friend recently described the New Hampshire House of Representatives to me as the least selective legislative body on the planet. I prefer to think of it as a real representative democracy. It is the largest state legislature with some 400 members. Happily, one of them is Renny Cushing. Perhaps worrying that he might not get another term, and that did happen, but he came back. With a beard in the winter and clean-shaven in the summer, he has offered legislation on a full complement of civil rights and human rights issues: gender identity, the environment, mental health parity, offshore drilling, wind power, care for dementia patients, wage fairness, cannabis, credit privacy, contaminated drinking water, conditions of confinement of the mentally ill, state pension funding, police body cameras, preservation of the traditional fishing industry, banning human trafficking, banning private prisons, making domestic violence a crime, preventing domestic abusers from possessing firearms, funding shelters for abuse victims, assuring crime victims the right to directly address their violent offenders in court at sentencing. Then there's the all-important designation of the red-tailed hawk as state raptor, a fabulous but longish story, so I'll advise you to Google it. Google red-tailed hawk John Oliver, and you'll get a good version of the story. Rennie's signature, though, is decades of work to end the death penalty in New Hampshire. With one person on death row, session after session, passing abolition and being vetoed by two governors, this year, 2019, New Hampshire passed abolition by veto-proof margins in both houses, got vetoed again by Governor Chris Sununu, remember that name, and did battle for the hearts and minds of the legislators, fighting for every vote in the override. The last vote was in the Senate, so Renny was in the gallery, a tiny balcony over the chamber that has housed a legislature longer than any other in the country. Before voting, the Senate recognized Renny up in the gallery in the company of his comrades and his daughters, acknowledging the accolades that he had earned over the decades. My great friend, a hero for justice, Renny Cushing.